So we're going to start with each of our panelists, and we're going to, on my immediate, on my far right, on your extreme left, Zarhuna, to begin with you, and then to Cinder, and then to Diana, each one telling a little bit about who they are, and the tradition that they come from, and what do you do during the day?
Hi, my name is Zarhuna Wakil. I work with Mosaic as the manager of Settlement and Integration Program. We do help newcomers to settle and integrate in Canada, and those newcomers are from different cultural groups and different parts of the world. I also manage the Seniors Club for Mosaic. Originally, I am from Afghanistan, but I grew up between Russia, Afghanistan, and Kyrgyz Republic. Really multicultural. And I came to Canada 12 years ago. When I came to Canada, I had no English, and I was really strange to the Western culture. So it took me some time to settle and integrate myself. So currently I'm also doing my master's program with SFU in public health. I identify as Muslim.
Hi, I'm Cinder Kaur, and I'm a Punjabi. I came from Punjab. I have lived in Hong Kong for almost 20 years. Then I immigrated to Canada around 17 years ago. So since then, I've been working with Success. Success provides really a variety of programs to the new immigrants. They provide social programs, but I'm only responsible for the healthcare programs. So we do have a variety of healthcare programs for seniors.
And you are of which tradition?
Punjabi. I'm Punjabi, and then I belong to Sikhism.
Hot Squad Tanoya, Niflin Cocklet Kushami, Diana Lewis Queens, Tanachantla, Chiak Misopomeo, Sanach Popomeo, Skomish, O Anunaxton Squallow, and Chenquin Antonia. I said, good day to you all. My ancestral name is Cocklet, which means a cannibal woman, big woman from the mountains. And every nation across Canada, especially along the coast of British Columbia, there's a legend in their territory of this big woman from the mountains. And when I say I'm Cocklet, they say you're Squamish. And I said, hey, yes. But my English name is Diana Lewis, and I'm from the Chiapas village, which is in the Paradise Valley in the Squamish area on the way to Whistler. But I also have to remind myself when I'm speaking that I'm also from Sanaa, which is in Kitsilano, down here in Vancouver. In 1906, my family was removed from that village. And so that was their winter homes. And so the Vancouver had mild winters here. And so they would transport from the spring and summer to winter where their harvest was. And so I always have to remember that teaching. So we ended up moving fully to Chiakamish. I've been a teacher for all my life. I'm a Squamish language teacher as well as a cultural teacher. I teach about our spirituality, our languages, and our lands, and how everything is connected. But I'm recently elected to our Squamish Nation Council and our governance, and so I oversee a lot of topics about our valley and Squamish, because we're kind of a little bit removed. We're 45 minutes between the city and the valley. But I have topics ranging from our language, our health, our elders in our community. I'm highly involved in our elders in our valley because my grandfather raised me, and talking about the importance to always have an elder in your life. And so I'll be able to talk about that a little later. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm a second-generation Canadian, but our family has probably been on the shores of this country for probably over 120 years. I can go to some cemeteries in Toronto where my father Olashon was buried, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my great-great-grandfather. Now, only my father was born in Toronto. The others all came here from Minsk. For those of you know me, you know I'm somewhat of a baseball fanatic. And there's a young baseball player for the Houston Astros by the name of Alex Bregman. Well, a couple of months ago, my colleague Howie Siegel was in town. Many of you know Howie Siegel. Howie's served more congregations than I have socks. And anyway, Howie is now down in Florida, and a member of his congregation happens to be the vice president of the Tampa Bay baseball team. And so he asked, Howie, do you want to go to a game? And he said, well, I'm really a Houston Astros fan. He said, good, they're coming next week. You can have my box seats right on third baseline. So he goes down to the baseball game, and he's sitting there before the game starts, and he sees Alex Bregman out on the field, and Howie says, hey, Bregman, come here. And he calls him over, and he said, I have a good friend who's a rabbi in Vancouver, and just want to know if you're any relation. And my friend, the rabbi, says, his family were from Minsk, and they had two jobs in Minsk. The first was stealing the Tsar's horses, and the second was running from the Tsar. Are you at all related? I don't have an answer yet, but I'll wait and see. So how do we treat, how do we acknowledge, how do we deal with the elderly in our specific communities?
For the traditions that I come from, and today I'll be talking mostly about Farsi Dari-speaking communities, which are from Iran, from Afghanistan, and also Tajikistan. Elderly, in the family level, they are considered to be the most respected people. They are the source of information, they are the source of advice, and they are people that usually the younger generation is taken care of.
So I might have to share both, although I'm sick today. Actually, I was going to talk about Chinese seniors because that's the place I work. For Punjabi, I would say it's very similar to what Zaguna said. Seniors in, the elderly in our Sikh community, of course, again, a value for their wisdom, for the hard work they have for their families and children, Again, they are very fond of having extended families living together. So that's very similar to what I'm going to share about Chinese, seniors as well. The Philau Payati, actually, one of the theory or one of the I think most commonly shared among Chinese is that's the virtue they really sort of tell their kids to have, and they basically everybody will sort of oblige to it. They feel they're obligated, but now it has become like this. There's nothing greater than this philosophy, for the seniors in Chinese, community. They really value the family. Everything is all around family, their gatherings, the upbringing of children, is all about family.
That's exactly the same for our community. I've been traveling around the world with other faiths, religions, and cultures. And that's one thing that I've always found that connects all of us, is how we treat our elders and what our elders mean to us. Our elders are our teachers, they're our knowledge holders, and we always have to have that balance. And we've been told we have to hear a story 50 times before we're allowed to share a story. And so you can imagine I spent lots of time with my grandfather to hear these stories. And in our community, our elders they're the ones that keep our balance in our society. And so we hold them at the utmost regard, the highest regard, and still do and always have.
So it is certainly much the same within the Jewish tradition. We have all sorts of statements both in the Hebrew Bible and in our oral tradition called the Talmud, statements about honoring and listening and so on. So we've got this notion in 3 and 4 different traditions. You represented sort of 2. But all these people are looking after emotionally or physically the elderly. Well, if that's the case, why is there so much source of difficulty and problems that exist within our elderly communities? Because when we take a look at the issue of poverty, certainly within the Jewish community, while we're not looking exclusively at that demographic, we are looking at a major portion of the poverty group within the Jewish community is connected with that demographic. So what's happened between what our traditions say and what the reality is? Are the younger generations looking after the older generations, or is it, so to speak, just on the books?
I think there's a difference between the generations back home and here. In their home countries, people live together. In Canada, they cannot, or they do not. Back home, because there is usually big families, women usually may or may not work. They may be at home, so younger women are at home and they can take care of the older generation and also raise kids. If I speak about Afghan community, they are relatively new in Canada. They started coming to Canada about 25 years ago. And what I see currently in our community, majority of the people are working, studying, and they are busy. They cannot take care of the elderly in the family. So, and they do not live together. Seniors are usually living by themselves in the housings, subsidized housings for seniors, or they live in senior homes, which are totally against our cultural values. And that creates some sort of family tensions too, because seniors have different expectations. Usually when they immigrate to Canada, they are a bit slower in learning the language, learning the culture, and integrating in this society. So accepting all of these new things are a bit, also the process is slow, and also accepting the new culture is difficult for them. Versus the younger generation, they are faster in learning the language, integrating, and they're faster in becoming, as we say, new Canadians. So that creates some sort of tension, which puts a bit of the mental pressure on the seniors as well. They get disappointed. They have immigration stress. They have depressions, and they're kind of lost in between the cultures.
Punjabi, I would say the same thing. Actually, in a family, you see typically right now living with the seniors is usually parents, then the kids, and the grandparents. So I think it's the parents, the middle group, who is most actually sort of stressed now in taking care of the younger kids as well as the seniors. We know that culture-wise, we should be taking care of this, our own parents and all that, but they are all struggling. So yes, it is true that the healthcare system does not have enough resources to relieve these caregivers' stress, especially when they are really trapped in the middle, like the sandwich. For Chinese seniors, I think they change from originally really living in bigger family, because I grew up in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, the flats and the areas where they live, the apartments are so small. There's no way they can accommodate so many members in such a small apartment. So what families tend to do, they buy apartments closer or rent apartments which is close by, so that they can still jump from one apartment to the other apartment to take care of their parents. So they still have those values that they really want to take care of their parents on their own, but then there comes a point when they no longer can, especially if the amount of attention the seniors need is huge, or there are some restrictions, some limitations, they can no longer provide care, then they really go through a struggle, because they really don't want to send their parents to the old age care home, assisted living program. We still see this in Vancouver. The families that we we deal with, all the seniors, when they come to our care facility, they really go through a hard adjustment period.
It's almost like tenfold different for our Indigenous communities here. What I see is our elders are outliving their children. And so there's a big gap. Just an example, my grandfather had 15 siblings, and a lot of them are still here. And then their children are not here. I had 7 aunts, 3 uncles, and only my mother and 1 auntie are left. And my mother was a middle child, and my auntie was the oldest. And so, again, even in that generation, she kind of fits in my grandfather's generation. My eldest auntie, she's 73 now. And we celebrate big when one of our community members even hits 60, because they're not even getting there. One of my uncles was 64, almost 65, and he was so excited to become an elder, to be a part of our elders group. And he actually passed away 2 months before he hit 65. And so it was really tragic. And so with that big gap, our grandparents are raised, like my grandfather raised me, and all his children's children, and even their great-grandchildren. And I look at our elders in our community right now, they're raising their great-grandchildren. So they have 3 generations that, a younger generation, they're kind of like all over the place with all the different drugs and things that are out there right now. And it's because a lot of their families went to residential school, and they're lost. My mother's generation are fairly lost, or never got healing for themselves. And so our elders are the ones teaching our younger children. And I was fortunate to be able to be one of them that grasped onto the culture. But even in my family, I have 32 first cousins, 5 brothers and a sister. And I was the only one that learned my language and spent that time with my grandfather. And one of my counselors actually said it saved me, because it was so important to know your identity of who you are and where you come from. And so I really grasped onto our culture and identity, and I'm rare in my community. And so it's really hard to see our community struggle and see our elders alone. And so we have lots of programs where we involve our elders at all events and functions, and even I feel weird being here without one of them with me. But I did a Facebook post and tagged them all in it and said I'm speaking about them today, and they were really happy. And some of them just won a huge award in our community. It's kind of like the Citizen of the Year award. It's like the key to the city. And we wanted to honor them while they're here, because they help in our language programs, our education programs. I call them our active elders. And they're just everywhere with us. And they say you're rich with how many elders you have in your community. And so we're still trying to get that shift to be able to assist and be able to help our elders. So we have people, we don't want them to leave their homes, so we have care workers that come right into their homes and work with the whole family. But then we also have child services coming in and telling the great-grandma she can't be raising her great-great-grandchildren. And, you know, it's such a hard kind of circle that we're fighting with here. But being able to assist our elders in any way we can. And so that's what I could say about that. I could talk all day about it.
I want to go on to another issue. What's the crisis, if anything, in your community with regard to how traditions are or are not being followed by a younger generation, and what type of crisis is that creating, if any, with an older generation who sees now that the ways, the traditions, the language, the folk story are simply not being passed on?
Ironically, for my cultural background, the older generation, which is my grandfather, has more open mind than my parents. So the older generation is okay with the changes that the grandchildren are accepting in terms of changing their culture or their ways of living. But the middle generation is kind of taking it hard. Personally, my grandfather lives here, my father lives overseas. I can speak easily with my grandfather than my father, although my father is not a conservative person. In terms of the cultural crisis, it happens when the newcomers come to Canada. We have a W model of settlement and integration, we call it in our settlement procedures. It's like starting with the honeymoon, they enter Canada, and then they go down. It's a time of depression and a realization that the expectations they had were a bit high. And then it goes back to adjustment and acceptance and integration, and then it goes back down a bit in terms of, again, adjustment, and then the process, the procedure of settlement goes up, and then that's the final stage of integration, and they're kind of settled and integrated, and they are, and based on one of the studies that was done by one of the professors, if I'm right, it's Professor Hebert. He has it in his studies that any newcomer, and of course the speed of adjustment for the immigrants was a bit faster than refugees. In 10 years of their arrival, they are settled economically and socially, and at 20 years of their arrival, they are even doing better than locals. So that was something that was kind of amazing to us, because we were looking into the answers how and why, and we thought that because they are probably more anxious and they are not in their usual habitual environment, that's why they are more proactive in terms of taking the opportunities and working hard on them.
For Punjabi as well as Chinese, I think the face and the glory for the family is huge. So whenever like anything a child does, as parents we worry about the face and glory of our parents. You know, I have to agree to Zaguna saying that actually elderlies, my grandparents and or my parents, because I have kids. They're better, but somehow we grew up in such a way. When I was living in Hong Kong, our Punjabi community was really small, so I was really rooted back to Punjabi culture. So I sort of grew up in a Punjabi culture. I still remember it's a story that when my son came here, they started doing projects, so that he has to bring girls home, which we were never allowed to have boys or girls coming to your house. So I was the one to struggle. And to my surprise, actually, when the girls, classmates came over, my mom and dad didn't react at all. But where I was the one actually scared to death, I'm like, what is my mom and dad going to say about that, So, but I do see the positive of having 3 generations living under the same roof. Is actually grandparents are just much better when they have the grandkids around them. The grandkids actually help them to adjust to the new culture. So my parents immigrated to Canada around 10 years ago. We were already living in Canada for 7 years by that time. So my kids sort of grew up here, So actually now they are helping their grandparents with everything, whatever they see on the TV or with the phone. My mom can finally actually use an iPhone at home. I never thought my mom would be able to do that, but my Chris, actually, to be honest, I don't have the time. I work and then take care of the family, but the grandkids help them. So I think actually 3 generations living under the same roof is perfect well for both the kids. They learn a lot from their grandparents, as well as for the seniors. They learn so much from the younger kids too. So other than the face and glory that the middle, I keep mentioning about, because it's our generation that's struggling. Is the daughter and son, not the grandparents and the younger kids actually. I think that would be great if we can have some housing options where that can be still achieved. We try to bring in at our healthcare program where I work, we try to bring in lots of kids to the care program for the same purpose. It's much easier to help the senior to learn a new skill or redevelop their skill using kids instead of us going and telling them, no, you should do it this way. When it comes from the kids, it's much more accepted, and that is easier for them to learn and they explore the things together.
Just wanted to first mention something about housing for our people in our community. Half of our nation lives off reserve in my Squamish community. I'm one of them. I've never lived on reserve. And one of the things that we're trying to do is we have a 10-year plan trying to get our community all, housed, and all our new housing developments, we actually have suites in our first floor for an elderly parents and grandparents, so easy access, all doors and everything are wheelchair accessible, and to make sure we always include that option to have an elder in our home. But also, I want to talk with the question at hand about our culture and identities. And everyone that I grew up with actually doesn't live in my hometown anymore. All the people I grew up with, I can count on this hand probably the people I know that I went to school with, because they all went to other communities that were more affordable to live. But my First Nation community, they still live there, and they're in serious poverty, really trying to work 2-3 jobs, trying to stay in their hometown. We've never left our community. We've been here since the last ice ages, and we don't want to go anywhere. So now we're trying to find options to make sure that we can stay in these communities, and this is our home. But we're coming a long way from our healing with our culture and identity, because you won't believe this, but when I talked about residential schools earlier, my grandfather was born a first language speaker of Skohomish. He was born in 1920, and when he was growing up, he went to school, and he had a really hard time adjusting to school. One, they weren't allowed to speak their language, and he was called boy for 2 years before an Indian agent came in and said, you got a new English name, and it's Norman Lewis. And he was like, Norman. Like, Norman. Like, Norman. And we don't have R's in our language, and so he had a really hard time saying that. And so he said, don't ever name your children after me. That wasn't my name given to me by my family. And my grandfather grew up, and he was told every day that it was savage and uncivilized to have brown color skin. Even as a 79-year-old man, he would scrub his skin with a hard cleaning product because he thought he was going to hell because he had brown skin, because that was told to him. It was really sad. But when my mother was growing up, he said, I never want my children to go through what I went through. So he never taught any of my aunties and uncles our language or culture or history. And when I was 8, I was at school, and this man came into my classroom, and he said, I'm going to be sharing some native songs and dances and some artwork. And I was like, oh, right, we're going to learn about native people today. And he said, can I get any volunteers to come up and dance? And my whole class looked at me, and I said, why are you looking at me? And they went, aren't you native? And I was like, I don't think so. No, because what I thought of native people was buckskin, feathers, teepees, longhouses, things I never saw. I just thought everyone had big families. And so it was the first time I actually thought of color of skin. And I'm half Native and I'm half Irish from my grandmother's side. And I have a lot of fair aunties and uncles and cousins, as well as some darker family. And I'm more on the other side, the dark side. And I said, maybe my mom is. No, my grandpa is. My grandpa must be. And the guy in my class said, can you come up here, Deanna? And I was really surprised he knew who I was. And so I walked up there, and I was so nervous, and I thought I was up there because I wasn't shy. And my class was like, "Aren't you Native?" And I was just like, just so weirded out that I just didn't know any of this. I remember it like it was yesterday. And so I said, "I don't know any songs or dances." And he said, "That's okay, I'll show you." And it was a victory song, a warrior song. And he showed me how to dance to it. I started dancing around my classroom. And my whole class ran to dance with me. I didn't realize I was the only Native person in my class. And there was only a few of us in my whole school. But I just remember my spirit waking up. It was like my identity of who I was. And I was just beaming, I remember, and just seeing my class participate with me. And the teacher, he said, "I can see a little spark for you. You know, you should go talk to your grandfather. He can tell you about our culture." And so I was like, "We're the same, you know?" And I said, "My grandpa knows this stuff?" And he said, "Yeah." And so it was quite amazing too. But he lived 10 kilometers away from me, so I was trying to ask all my aunties, my cousins, my brothers, and they all kept saying, "Go away, stop asking silly questions." And it was really frustrating. And so when I finally got to my grandpa's house a few weeks later, I went running up to him. I said, "Grandpa," I'm like, "are we Native?" He goes, "Oh, of course we are. What do you think we were?" And he goes, "But you're Stomo." And I go, "Stomo?" He goes, "You're a human being. We don't have another word for any other nationality or race. We're the two-legged. We bleed the same, we breathe the same, we're Stomo." And I said, "You know, Grandpa, I was really upset because my whole class was learning about our culture, and I didn't know that I was Native." And he said, "I never want to feel like that again." I said, "I want you to speak only Scohomish Nation to me." And he said, "Hey, you pick it up really fast." And that's what started that beautiful relationship with my grandfather. And I had him till I was 24. And they said, "When you lose now, you gotta find another one." So I surround myself with elders, and I feel really blessed looking around the room today with a lot of our elders here. And I just want to thank you all for being here.
As far as the 3 generations are concerned, this past week, our middle child, her husband, and their son, our grandson, moved into our house. Now, I think I was the last to know this. They're planning on doing some renovations for their condo, and they wanted to move out, and while the renovations could take place, and then they're planning on moving somewhere else. And you're damn right, I hope. However, as my brilliant Israeli son-in-law said to me, "How fast do you want us to move out?" I don't know if you understand what the question was. Yes, exactly. "Oh, so where are you helping us to buy next?" But it is fascinating, and I have to tell you, I love it. To come down in the morning now and to not only see my daughter, my son-in-law, and now my grandson living in the house. And of course, they brought their dog and their cat. Why not? And the absolute zoo that goes on, but it is a wonderful zoo. And I don't think we have enough zoos going on in our homes to see this intergenerational mixing and so on, and languages, and the other thing that is so very important, and you realize this, we can knock our medical system. I'm going to tell you that I feel very fortunate, having come through some major surgery recently, of having a fantastic medical system, fantastic surgeons. But I also know that going into a hospital, you need an advocate. You really do. Now, I had my wife, who's a phenomenal advocate. And I also had my son, who happens to be a doctor. And so there's another advocate. And I can't imagine what that would have looked like if I didn't have that advocacy. And that is something that is so needed. And if the one generation is not going to step up, then where is that advocacy going to come from? And especially if you're here and they're in Toronto, or vice versa, and so on, or not even in this continent, where's that advocacy going to? And there's so much that then just slips through the cracks. And this is another area and perhaps a whole area of medicine that needs to be looked at in terms of medical advocacy for individuals who are alone and need somebody else.
And on the topic of aging across the cultures, just share a little information with you about some of the work that we're doing over at Mount Pleasant Neighborhood House. And as was shared with you, I'm the Director of Community Programs there. I hold the portfolios of seniors, employment, volunteer, settlement services, and youth. So I get a chance to interact with a lot of different sectors, but I have to say my passion is working with the seniors in our community. I have a master's in gerontology, and my area of study was in aging in place in the urban environment. So I'm really interested in how we intersect with each other and how we coexist in our communities. So one of the projects that we are doing over there is called Multicultural Circles. And we have been looking at all the different cultures that were coming to the neighborhood house, but also noticing that two things. One, people had fascinating stories, amazing, rich stories when they were given the space and the time to share those stories. We also noticed that people tend to sit in pockets. So we want to sit with those that we're most comfortable with. It's just human nature, and especially if we're in somewhere new, we tend to gravitate to those that we feel that we have similarities with. But then that almost creates a divide rather than bringing us together. So we were trying to figure out how it is, can we bring people together but still feel safe and still share. So we came up with this idea of these multicultural circles, and the idea was really to form a circle and each week have a different topic, different culture, different area that we would be talking about. So it has ranged everything. It began with dance, what I thought was really interesting, all the different dances, so it turned into a bit of a dance class. And we had to change that because the idea was not for those who were only able-bodied and already coming, the people that could dance. The idea was that regardless of where you were sitting, that you would be able to participate. So textiles started to be talked about. And then I'm going to guess that you may be able to guess what the other big thing was. Of course, food, absolutely. So we ended up having food and cooking classes where people were gathering in our kitchen and sharing their favorite recipes. And the other piece that's sort of interwoven with this is we do a pole walking program. And the same idea again is that it's not just for those that are really brisk, fast walkers around the neighborhood, but that it's for everybody who wants to join us. And through those walking programs, people now are also, oh, were you at, the circle that we did around Chinese-speaking seniors in our community? Oh, did you hear about this great dumpling recipe? You gotta get this, go and talk to Jane. And so these things are happening that we're starting to see, and people are not sitting so much in their own circles, but there's a little more mixing starting to happen.
I would like to share some of the information about the seniors program at Mosaic, and I have some pictures. I hope I can just access them. So our vision is to empower newcomers to fully participate in Canadian society. And the Seniors Club in Mosaic has people from all these cultural backgrounds. And they come together in groups and they learn about Canadian systems. They have English conversation circles in which they do communications in English. And then they learn about Canadian society, and they also make friends with all the participants in those groups. And these are the services provided through the seniors programs. which is settlement and integration, language services, community connections, which includes field trips to different services, interpretation and translations, employment and volunteering depending on the age, and then case management if needed. And those case management also includes accompaniments to appointments and also connecting them to different services as needed. You know, the cultures that are coming from the Central Asia and Middle East and even from the Asian countries, they usually are very connected to the land and to do the gardening in their homes. And when they come to Canada, they miss that. So Mosaic have places in Burnaby, in Vancouver. They get it from the cities, and they do the community garden with the seniors program.
We combined our education, our health, and recreation and elders programs, because we see how they all tie together. Our elders were our teachers, and if you're healthy, your community's healthy. And not only do we branch those groups together, it has all the ages in those groups too. So right from our children to our elders. And we've actually reached out to other neighboring Indigenous communities like from Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, in Deep Cove area, and we bring them all. We just had a huge Seniors Day festival, and where we had our young dance group from our education program speaking in our language and doing their dancing and singing. And there was a great time where our kids introduced their whole family trees in our language with pictures and seeing how they were actually connected to all the neighboring villages with those place names, those family names. And a lot of our elders were crying, knowing that these little mama, these little children, know who they are and where they come from and how we're all tied together. And so we're looking at different ways with sharing resources of funding. I know we've applied to United Way as well, and so we're always looking for different grants and things to really bring our nations together. But I know we can do more in all the other multicultural faiths as well. I tend to be in a room all the time, being the only First Nations person in the room, and I'm okay with that. I grew up in a culture where I like to share our culture and seeing how we can all, belong, and we're all welcome. Like I said, we all live here, and then how do we connect each other? And so I'm always trying to invite our neighboring communities, literally my neighbors, to events and ceremonies, our powwows, all our cultural events. And so those are some of our successes we've done.
For Mosaic, the seniors program started around 2010 with just around 20 seniors coming, and all were of Korean background. Currently, the Seniors Club and Mosaic have close to 500 members. And we have around 12 cultures being part of it. We also started a seniors leadership program where we have seniors who are more active and want to be providing back to the community. We train them to be facilitators and some leadership skills training, and now they do their own groups in Mosaic facilities, and they run groups. So that was one of the success stories for Mosaic.
Well, within the Jewish community, we have the Louis Breyer Home of the Aged, and because it was recognized, thank goodness, many, many generations ago, that an individual should have the opportunity, if he or she wants to live out their life with the traditions that they had during their life, and not to end up in some foreign place in the last years of one's life. And the government has been slow to really understand how important the cultural, religious, linguistic aspects, food, how important that is, smells, taste, and everything else. It still is a challenge for us in the community because we need to have enough space where money is not an issue. And for some individuals coming through as the baby boomers, you know, they won the lottery by making more money while they slept than anything else because of real estate, but not for everyone. And so those types of housing are still desperately needed. We also have within our community a number of our synagogues who have come up with programs with regard to seniors. And to me, one of the things that we need to do more of is this intergenerational mentoring, where the younger generation gets the opportunity to really learn from the experience of those who have come before them. Not everything under the sun is new. And a lot of things are not. Yes, science and medicine and technology are tremendously different and changing and so on. But a lot of aspects of basic understanding are not. And this is where we need to have the younger generation take full advantage of an older generation as well. I want to call on Larry Shapiro to wrap up this day. And as I say,
for those who don't know me, my name is Larry Shapiro. I'm Vice President of Pure Seniors Alliance, as well as an active senior Pure counselor with our wonderful organization. I would like to thank our esteemed guests who have provided a very interesting, entertaining, and more important, thought-provoking afternoon.